On September 14, 2025, Ukraine just flipped the script with a single night that lit up the map. Russia said at least 361 Ukrainian drones were launched in one wave. That swarm reached the St. Petersburg orbit, where the Kirishi oil refinery, southeast of the city, caught fire and exposed the soft underbelly of fuel logistics. Cheap wings flew long, silent lanes, while quiet hands reached for tracks and sensors far from the front. Fires rose where fuel turned into power, screens blinked where radar turned into aim, and timetables broke where trains turned into tempo. This is an energy and logistics fight, not a headline about one town changing hands. It hits ports before trenches, refineries before roadblocks, and command rhythm before morning briefings. The question is simple and sharp. When fuel and coordination stall, how long can mass hold the line? Stay with us as we trace the pattern, name the targets, and read what comes next for Moscow and Kyiv. Like, share, and subscribe to Military Force for clear maps, clean facts, and sharp analysis, because the next move is already in motion. Now, let's set the stage. Ukraine shifted the center of effort from trenches to fuel lines, and the change showed within 72 hours. Long-range UAVs flew through gaps, while planners mapped valves, berths, and rail chokes that kept brigades moving. Strikes focused on assets that turn crude into power and timetables into combat tempo, because cutting flow weakens fire support before soldiers feel it. The aim was clear yet limited. Break rhythm, raise risk, and force Moscow to defend deep instead of pushing wide. With that intent on the table, the campaign moved toward the Baltic Gateway where oil meets open water, and that is where Primorque enters the frame. Pressure on ports mattered because export hubs sit upstream of every depot, convoy, and generator that relies on refined stocks. When loading arms pause, shipping windows slip, and insurers revisit premiums, the cost curve tilts against sustained operations. A single outage at a high-volume terminal can echo into rail schedules and inland storage, while crews scramble to isolate damage and check lines. This approach trades flashy gains for durable friction, since delays multiply as calendars drift and buffers shrink. With friction mounting at sea, the second lever pointed inland toward the Leningrad fuel backbone, which brought Kirishi into view. Hitting refineries targeted the conversion stage that turns barrels into diesel, jet, and gasoline for vehicles, aircraft, and generators. Disruption at cracking, hydro-treating, or loading racks may not cut output to zero, yet even partial downtime forces reroutes that burn time. City demand near St. Petersburg leaves little slack, so outages collide with civil needs while units in the field compete for the same pool. Each forced detour spends trucks, guards, and escorts that would otherwise cover frontline tasks, which compounds the original strike. As refinery pressure rose, planners reached for a third lever that travels on steel, and the rail corridors became a contested artery. Rail sabotage attacked tempo rather than tonnage, because stopped trains erase plans faster than destroyed wagons. Charges under key sections broke continuity, while security units diverted to patrol bridges, yards, and junctions instead of staging for offense. Even a day of closure triggers a queue that takes many shifts to unwind, and that backlog consumes locomotives and crews across the grid. War favors the side that controls the calendar, so these delays mattered more than visible wreckage on any single siding. With calendar control in play, the campaign still needed to blind counter-battery sensors, which led to the radar fight. The air picture and the gun picture meet at the sensor, so forcing radars to hide reduces the reach of artillery and SAM cues. When a system emits, it reveals itself, and precision rockets can punish that reveal with guided effects at standoff range. Killing or suppressing those nodes protects guns, extends UAV freedom, and keeps repair teams under strain far from the front. This triangle, ports, refineries, and rails, works only if sensors stay under pressure, because sensing is what turns metal into plan. With the triangle established and the logic set, the focus narrows to the first blow at the Baltic outlet, and Primorske becomes the test. Primorske mattered because it is the Baltic outlet where Russian crude meets the sea, and the strike on September 12th turned that gateway into a choke point. Drones came in low and wide, aiming for loading arms, manifolds, and the ships alongside, since a hit at the pier multiplied into delays across the whole schedule. Fire broke out on the water and on metal, and crews moved to isolate lines as pumps wound down to safe mode under emergency rules. With the pier under stress, the question shifted from how many drones to how long the port could hold tempo without full capacity, which set the frame for the hours ahead. Two Aframax-class tankers, reported as Cousteau and Kai Yun, took the worst of the damage, and their injuries mattered because ship availability drives how fast crude leaves the coast. Aframax hulls move roughly 700,000 barrels across a few voyages, so any dent in readiness forces reassignments that ripple into charter costs and delivery times. AIS plots showed long periods at anchor rather than clean departures, which signals inspections, clearance checks, and insurer reviews before new cargo can be lifted. When hulls wait and berths stall, the port's calendar slips by itself, which is why those hours at anchor carried more weight than the flames did. Terminal managers contained the blaze and restarted limited operations, yet partial capacity is not a full recovery, because one offline berth reshapes every queue downriver. Pumps can hum while hoses rest, but missing crews, scorched fittings, or damaged fenders still slow the turn of ships that must load, test, and depart under strict standards. Reports pointed to a stepwise return beginning September 15th, which tracks with the time needed to certify lines, repair sensors, and confirm structural checks on the pier. A staggered restart helps safety but locks in friction, since each careful step trades speed for assurance, which keeps the backlog stubborn even when lights come back on. For buyers and carriers, the risk premium rose as the event unfolded, because war risk add-ons and liability questions travel faster than replacement parts. Insurers read fire, explosive hazard, and drone exposure into their models, and that math flows straight into freight rates that touch every cargo in the lineup. Traders, in turn, hedge exposure by spacing lifts or shifting to alternate terminals, but detours burn days and tug fleets are finite in tight weather windows. That is why a single damaged berth at a major outlet can tug on both the local harbor plan and the broader export cadence, even without a headline shutdown. For Moscow, the deeper problem sat behind the flames, because defending a pier drains air defense units from frontline sectors that already juggle drones and rockets. Pulling Tor or Pantsir toward the city reduces umbrella depth over road hubs and rail junctions, while fresh repairs demand guards, divers, and maintenance teams under pressure. The lesson at Primorske is that a precise hit at the loading edge reshapes the calendar more than the coastline, and calendars decide whether brigades fight on schedule. With the gateway tested and only a partial reset in place, attention moved inland to the refinery that feeds the region's engines, and Kirishi soon took the spotlight. Russia said at least 361 UAVs crossed its borders on the night of September 14th, and that number matters because mass can overwhelm even layered shields. Large salvos stretch radars, confuse operators, and burn interceptors faster than trucks can reload, while cheap airframes trade well against costly missiles. Multiple headings split attention, electronic noise hides tracks, and false targets force early shots that drain stocks before real threats arrive. This was saturation by design, not a lucky swarm, because timing and geometry turned volume into pressure across many nodes at once. With scale established, the real story is how that pressure mapped onto critical ground. The spread reached deep into Russia's northwest, so defenses had to cover cities, ports, depots, and lines of command at the same hour. When batteries pivot to shield urban fuel hubs, they leave thinner cover over rail hubs and airfields, and that gap invites further probes. Short-range guns can kill small drones, yet they cycle slowly and need clean cues from higher tiers to stay efficient under stress. Long-range systems can reach far, but they must choose sectors and hold shots for bigger tracks, which creates delay at low altitude. As coverage thinned by necessity, the advantage moved to whoever controlled timing and route design. Wave logic decided outcomes because sequence turns numbers into effects, and effects create windows for follow-on strikes. Decoys at distance pull search radars wide, main bodies slip through clutter at low level, and finishers arrive inside reload cycles at key spots. Night flying helps because background noise rises, visual cues fade, and thermal contrast hides small propellers near ground features. Weather also matters since wind, cloud, and rain cells can mask routes or force defenders to rotate sensors away from the true axis. Once windows opened in several places, the question shifted from single kills to how long the system could hold a steady rhythm. Sustained strain carries costs beyond hardware, since crews tire, checklists lengthen, and maintenance drifts when alerts stack without pause. Every emergency launch burns fuel, barrels, and spares that must be replaced, while repair teams chase fragments across roofs and piers. Harbors slow when inspections pile up, rail timetables slip when guards patrol bridges, and insurers widen war risk bands after visible fires. These frictions do not win territory, yet they steal time, and time drives the pace of artillery, resupply, and rotation across the front. With time under pressure, both sides must adapt faster than the other can reset. Ukraine will likely keep mixing routes, altitudes, and decoys to hold the defender off balance, because novelty beats routine in drone warfare. Russia will answer by adding more low-tier sensors, dispersing fuel stocks, hardening loading arms, and randomizing patrol cycles around key sites. Watch for satellite heat blooms at refineries, longer anchorage periods for tankers, and unexpected shoreward moves toward industrial belts. Also track temporary NOTAMs, rail closures, and fresh debris fields, since these signals reveal where the shield bent and where it thickened. With those indicators in mind, attention turns to the refinery that powers the region's engines, and Kirishi now comes into sharp relief. Kirishi mattered because it turns crude into motion for a major Russian city, and the blast pattern on September 14th hit that conversion point where small shocks ripple into big delays. Local feeds showed fire and thick smoke near process hardware, while plant security moved to seal valves and drop pressure, since hot metal and fuel vapors do not forgive mistakes. Managers ordered a controlled stop on key units for inspection and repairs, and that choice traded output for safety in a region that lives on tight fuel cycles. With production throttled and checks underway, St. Petersburg's supply cushion shrank by the hour, which set the stage for a wider logistics squeeze across the northwest. Damage at a refinery hurts more than a scorched wall because the critical parts are inside: cracking towers, hydrotreaters, compressors, and sensors that keep chemistry on spec. Even light debris can nick cabling or rupture small lines, and those faults force extended downtime, since every joint must pass tests before flows resume. Temporary fixes bring some pressure back, yet partial capacity still slows loading racks and rail spurs, so dispatchers stretch delivery windows to avoid accidents. As dispatch times lengthened, queues migrated from plant gates to city forecourts, which pushed the risk from a single site into the urban routine. Kirishi's role is structural, not symbolic, because it balances regional demand while feeding export flows when the grid is stable. When a large unit pauses, truck fleets must lift more miles, and each extra run burns diesel that could have been sold to motorists or stored for emergencies. Pipeline operators can reroute batches, yet reroutes disturb schedules at other depots, so delays spread beyond the first map square. With buffers thinning and drivers waiting longer, wholesalers raise caution levels, and that caution shows up as fewer night deliveries across the ring roads. Safety protocols also slow the rebound, since hot works require permits, scaffolds, and gas tests in every bay. Insurers and regulators ask for proof that lines, seals, and pressure vessels meet standard, and those documents take days even when parts are on hand. Procurement becomes another choke point if specialized valves or sensors are scarce, because certified replacements cannot be pulled from any shelf. As each checklist cleared, output climbed step by step, yet stepwise recovery locks friction into the calendar, which is why the aftershocks lasted beyond the first week. Civil effects trailed the technical ones, since priority fuel goes to hospitals, transit, and public safety fleets before private buyers see relief. Retail stations protect pumps from dry runs by limiting flow, and such limits feel like rationing even when warehouses still hold stock. Freight forwarders then reshuffle trips to cover high-need districts, while low-margin routes slip a day or two, and those slips add up at the city scale. When the street senses uncertainty, demand spikes at the wrong moment, and that spike magnifies every shortfall left by the shutdown. For Moscow, the defense puzzle grew harder because guarding a high-value plant pulls shorted teams, patrols, and maintenance crews away from other tasks. Tor and Pantsir batteries can ring the perimeter, yet drone routes are many and the terrain is cluttered, so perfect coverage remains out of reach. Hardening flare stacks and manifolds helps, but guards and cameras do not fix the core vulnerability, which is timing. Attackers only need a small opening to force another pause. As long as Kirishi faces intermittent pressure, planners must carry spare capacity elsewhere, and spare capacity is expensive in both money and manpower. The strategic message is simple. When the conversion stage slows, the whole system loses tempo, and tempo is what keeps artillery, aviation, and civil life in rhythm. Ports can move crude, and rails can move barrels, but without steady refining, fleets and generators slip out of sync and costs rise across the board. Ukraine's designers aimed at that hinge, using cheap airframes to impose dear choices, while Russia's managers scrambled to prove resilience under watch. With refinery nerves exposed and city routines strained, the campaign's logic turns to sensors and routes, because blinding radars and choking rails completes the pressure triangle. Ukraine's doctrine now blends long-range UAVs, rail sabotage, and precision rockets into one rhythm, because pressure on many points at once breaks coordination faster than a single hard hit. Cheap drones range far and arrive in layered waves, while planners time routes so decoys pull sensors wide and finishers slip into low corridors. This approach burns interceptors, drains maintenance hours, and forces command posts to divide attention, since crews must guard ports, depots, and command links at the same hour. When defenders juggle too many alerts, they accept blind spots or delays, and either one opens a door for follow-on strikes that keep the clock off balance. From that pressure point, the fight moves to the rails to hold the tempo down. Rail attacks aim at movement, not mass, because a stopped train erases more plans than a broken wagon. Charges under bridges or junctions block corridors, and even a short closure creates queues that last many shifts, as locomotives, guards, and repair teams stack up in the wrong places. Freight that misses a window forces new schedules at depots and fuel yards, so trucks and escorts cover longer legs, which consumes diesel and morale at the same time. These cuts do not change the map by themselves, yet they bend timelines across a whole region, and timelines decide whether units arrive with full stocks and fresh crews. That is why the radar hunt matters for the next phase of the campaign. Vilka M rockets finish the triangle by punishing emitters the moment they radiate, since a radar that speaks too long gives away its grid. Killing Zoopark or driving it silently protects guns, extends UAV freedom, and keeps repair teams busy far from the front, while counter-battery fire loses speed and reach. Ground seed tactics also force defenders to choose between saving sensors or guarding sites, and either choice weakens the other shield. When sensors hide, drones roam. When sensors talk, rockets arrive, and in both cases the calendar slips for the side under strain. Which is how the three tools reinforce one another and set the stage for the closing pressure on Moscow's wider logistics. Energy, sensors, and rail now define the real front line, because when those nodes fail, tempo slips before any map changes. Force batteries and engineers to guard the rear, and costs rise fast, while long-range strikes gain room to work. Patch the shield and spread stocks, and rhythm may return in parts, yet war risk, premiums, and security surcharges still weigh on every shipment. Hardening helps on paper, but each new layer pulls money, crews, and spares from other tasks, which weakens depth at the edge. Hold the sensor picture and counter battery improves, yet any radar that emits under stress risks a guided reply from standoff range. Silence protects hardware for a night, but silence also slows decisions, and slow decisions bleed tempo across a sector. The near term is a race between pressure and repair, because cumulative friction can outrun single fixes. Watch satellite frames over Primorque and Kirishi for capped berths, heat plumes, and scaffolds, since imagery tells you what statements omit. Track anchorage times for Kusto and Kaiyun, because long waits hint at inspections, legal checks, and higher premiums. Follow AIS gaps and insurer notices tied to the shadow fleet, as paperwork often moves before cranes do. Note recurring rail closures around St Petersburg SCOF, because repeat repairs mean the calendar remains under strain. If these signals stack, Ukraine keeps the initiative in depth. If they ease, Moscow buys time at a growing price. Stay with military force for clear maps, verified numbers, and sharp breakdowns. Like, share, and subscribe so the next update reaches you first.